We're often told that the fourth industrial revolution will be good for South Africa. New high-tech jobs, more control over our lives. But for now, the reality looks very different.
Within the e-hailing sector, you've got more than 10 billion in assets operating.
And the management of Uber is raking all of the benefits of these tens and billions of profits for themselves.
The pace of the fourth industrial revolution has been extremely accelerated by COVID.
It's no electricity in that business, no network.
The data, it's very expensive. You cannot do anything without data.
Can't stop for IR. We've got to adapt or die.
Welcome to the Big Debate. I'm Ridi Tlhabi. Self-driving cars, 3D printing, robot workers, instant delivery of everything your heart desires. These sound like things out of a science fiction movie, but these technologies are being developed in many countries around the world as we speak. This is the fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR. It has been promoted as a new dawn that will improve the lives of people across the country and the world. President Ramaphosa says that the 4IR must be harnessed to change the way we live, learn, work and govern. But harnessed for whom? In a country battling rolling blackouts and with most of the population on the back foot because of the high cost of data and technology, how do we ensure 4IR does not create new inequalities? How well is the fourth industrial revolution working for Uber or Takealot customers versus their drivers? And who profits the most on these fourth industrial revolution apps? Can we ensure that the majority of the workforce is not left behind in the wake of this transformation? Is it even possible to design an industrial revolution that is for the people and by the people? Joining me for this conversation are Rendani Mbuva, Google PhD Fellow in Machine Learning. We also have Ufenze Mukwena of Uber South Africa and a specialist in the future of work. Zwelinzi Mavavi, General Secretary, South African Federation of Trade Unions, that's SAFTU. We also have Professor Alison Gilwald, Executive Director of Research, ICT Africa. And in our virtual audience, we have the fourth industrial revolution right here with the virtual audience. Our taxi drivers, delivery workers, entrepreneurs, students, and diverse South Africans with views about the fourth industrial revolution and the future of work. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you, and welcome to you at home. A reminder, you can join this conversation using the hashtag on your screen. Let's start with the audience. Wave at me if you think that it will improve all our lives. Okay, Zolani is quite enthusiastic there. I think he's even screaming. A couple of you are very excited. But some of you are wary, right? You don't trust what's happening. Wave your hand at me. Okay, that's great to know. We're going to hear all your views and your comments later on. Rendani, let me start with you. The fourth industrial revolution means automation. It means that we could possibly be replacing people with robots. But even now, our lives are being run by apps. We are ordering our food, our furniture, we're getting education online. And we are seeing how technology is replacing traditional work. Isn't that akin to driving new forms of inequality?
Some of those risks arise when these technologies come to play. And what is incumbent upon us as members of societies, leaders in society, is to make sure that our society is well prepared to pivot in terms of the types of skills that will be required in this new revolution. And some of the work that we've been doing in the university communities is training people in those skills and allowing them to be individuals who can actually seize the opportunities that arise from these technologies.
Ufenze, you are running a project called The Future of Work at Uber. Why would a driver or a security guard be excited about the fourth industrial revolution when they're being controlled by apps?
We are creating an economy in which various players are actually competing for drivers, couriers, other types of services. In Africa, we have almost 300 platform work opportunities continent-wide. So the idea is to create this conduit for the work that used to be informal, uncoordinated, and really provide it with an aggregate platform. By the way, that's 60% of the global labor force. It's really in the informal space.
Zwelinzi Mavavi, you have said as a SAFTU Secretary General that jobs will be automated. You are warning that there'll be increased surveillance over our lives. In fact, you used the term, we'll be living in a technocratic dystopia. Are you anti-progress? If the new jobs are coming from Amazon, Takealot and Bolt, isn't that better than having no work at all?
We are the West when it comes to us being prepared with the FYR in South Africa, in the context of our history, in the context of this massive developmental backlogs and the crisis of unemployment, which have been worsened by the coronavirus, lost 1.4 million jobs last year alone. Our unemployment rate amongst our young people is absolutely catastrophic. We're dealing with a crisis already. And of course, the point that you are raising is, can we avoid this? And the answer, Red, is that no, we can't avoid it.
You don't trust that it will create new jobs?
It will do both. It will displace labor in traditional sources of employment, but it will also create new opportunities. So we've got to embrace the fact that it is a threat, but also it is an opportunity.
And what Ufenze said there, that it's 60% of the informal sector. So if we are already talking about workers that are already not protected, that do not have any sorts of being organized in a way that helps them be recognized as a sector, shouldn't that excite you as a labor union?
The fact that too many workers are not protected by the current labor legislative regime because they are not playing in the formal sector of the economy, the unions have been weakened. All of those things are going to work to the disadvantage of workers in the economy. And that's why unions must be better prepared to embrace opportunities and to better manage the risk of the fourth industrial revolution.
Alison, help us out here. Is there such a thing as an inclusive fourth industrial revolution?
Not as currently conceived. If you overlay these advanced technologies on existing structural inequalities, you simply exacerbate those. If we look at what's happening with the fourth industrial revolution, we've got to prepare ourselves for it, but we have to do it in a way that redresses historical legacies around digital inequality and data injustice. And that's not happening at the moment. We've got in South Africa just over half of the population connected to the internet. We're not going to see those benefits. They're not going to be equitable. And in fact, they're not only not equitable within countries, but also between countries. In the US with the big tech companies and in China is really where this is all happening. And these big global platforms do indeed offer opportunities for work to unemployed people in Africa. What we see here in Africa is really platform-sourced manual labor. But we have to look at meeting, basic International Labour Organization principles on allowing these workers to negotiate a fair wage, etc.
I want to pick on you, Mr. Smatsingonyama. What is happening in Japan, and is it something that we can learn here in South Africa?
Fundamentally, the issue that I would like to raise, Reddy, is that this has to be embraced by everybody, starting from government. Government has to come up with policies to integrate our country into the global world, because there's no way that will remain outside the globalized world when it comes to fourth industrial revolution. And therefore, we need flexibility of the public sector and very strong and capable civil service. For instance, when it comes to health, agriculture, and so on and so forth, they collate this big data. They talk of a society 5.0. If you look at China, for instance, China already has come up with a Shenzhen ecosystem district. If you look at Shenzhen, China is actually pulling everything and mobilizing all resources into Shenzhen.
Let's wrap it up just there. There is an audience member from Makause who wants to say something in disagreement.
I'm coming from Makause informal settlement in the east of Joburg. There's no preparations like we've seen when the corona started to hit, that there were no awareness around this. There was no assistance even for the kids on this online learning. And with the informal settlements like ourselves, where there's no future plans even from the government side, there's no electrification. So how many of us who are facing this inequality are going to be incorporated and assisted in terms of understanding, even being online or not being left aside?
I think General is raising something so absolutely crucial. Rendani, I want to come to you because what we're seeing is that it's people with skills, the workers, the cleaners, that are now having to interact with a customer via an app with big returns for the manufacturers. Should we not be putting this fourth industrial revolution on ice until we have prepared the workers and we have designed an education curriculum that helps citizens embrace it?
It's actually a revolution that has come ahead of what the preparation of most nations is. And therefore, as we embrace it, we have to take an agile approach. As for example, technologies and apps, in some cases, they aggregate the power in the hands of technology companies, including the profits. What we need to do as we transition and prepare our populations and societies, we need to be able to, protect them in terms of labor rights and actually in terms of minimum wages. We're seeing the same type of labor issues arising in Amazon in the US and how some of those workers are treated. So we need to have the relevant protections for society while we're reskilling and actually also making sure that they're earning, what is commensurate to the work they're doing.
What would life be without Uber, Bolt, Mr. Delivery, and Take-A-Lot? They've made our lives easier, but what's the hidden cost? When we return, we talk to the unseen people. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching The Big Debate on the advent of the new technologies and new types of jobs, also known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So in South Africa, one sector where the impact of the Fourth Industrial Revolution has been most contested is in the taxi and delivery industries. With the rise of e-hailing companies like Uber, Bolt, and now Didi, tens of thousands of workers in South Africa have become slaves to an app without traditional employment contracts. Take a look at this.
I make money for them. And for me too.
E-hailing services have made our lives easier and more convenient, allowing us to move around cities and get food deliveries at the touch of a button, while creating opportunities for drivers to make money.
I've been working for Bolt and Uber for 2 years now. I'm making a decent living from this profession, and I'm doing well for myself.
However, not all e-hailing drivers have a good story to tell.
It was paying way better before, but now, as for there's no option or alternatives.
And for other players in the industry, e-hailing has completely disrupted their businesses.
Well, the meter tax operators have been reduced to owner drivers. Some of them, they are even out of business, most of them.
As meter taxi operators fight for their livelihoods, e-hailing drivers face a battle to be recognized as employees instead of independent contractors in hopes of accessing labor protections.
This is a way that they've used as a tactic to escape accountability in respect of how drivers work. The conditions of drivers in South Africa really are those of employees. Uber controls the trips acceptancy. People who get low rates, they can be deplatformed from an Uber app. They get fined. And all those issues really demonstrates that these people are not performing duties of an independent contractor, but those of an employee.
Yeah, even on the streets, there are some accidents. Then the company doesn't pay us. If we got injured on the way, then it's on our side.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says the Fourth Industrial Revolution is an opportunity for us to unlock future jobs. But do those from industries that have been directly impacted by 4IR agree?
I think since the unemployment rate is so high, introducing the 4IR, it will be an issue. Now, a machine is replacing 10 people or 20 people.
If ever they bring those technology things, a lot of people will lose their job.
I think as a country, we are 10 years or 15 years behind. And from the government point of view, it's all talks, no action.
So let's hear from Vatuka Mbelengwa, Chairman of Public-Private Transport Association. What are your thoughts, Vuteka?
The Fourth Industrial Revolution presents an opportunity for us to transform our nation. But first and foremost, we need to become proactive and no longer be reactive. And we need to determine for ourselves as a nation how technology should impact our people. As Private Public Transport Association, our viewpoint is that we don't want to replace human ability. We want to make sure that we can make human talent more efficient. We want to make the informal market more accessible to the world at large. And this is how we need to begin to position ourselves as a nation to embrace this revolution. If we're just going to sit back and be reactive to global solutions being dumped onto our country, we're going to find ourselves in a situation that Uber has created, where we are killing each other, where there's mass exploitation, where money is not being retained within our economy. So as the president went out and promised that, look, 4IR will deliver employment, I think first and foremost, we need to first determine what sort of impact we want to mine as a nation from this Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that in itself will then inform the policy and regulation.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because I know that you were organizing Uber drivers not so long ago. Why were you doing that?
We believe that we need to show people in industry where their strength truly is. You know, within the e-hailing sector, you've got more than 10 billion in assets operating. And those skills, those assets do not belong to Uber, they belong to us. You know, this investment stems from our homes. And we need to understand this at a very granular level. You know, it is a parent who cashed in a pension fund to get a vehicle for a son or a daughter to partake on such a platform. And because we then own the majority of this investment, we need to begin to behave in a manner reflective of investors and give direction and choose who we want to partner with.
Do you not feel like full partners in the current architecture?
We're not partners at all. You know, they call us driver partners, owner partners, but there isn't a single decision-making platform reflective of a partnership. You know, we don't choose what the pricing is. We can't decide what the increases should be or the decreases. You know, fuel has gone up substantially over the past 5 years, and we haven't had a single price increase within the e-hailing sector. And then you're getting global organizations like Didi that have billions to blow, dumping their platforms into our market to retain this customer base, but there's absolutely no beneficiation towards the investors or the drivers.
Let's give Uber a chance to respond here. We're hearing from the drivers, you've left them in between. They're not employees, they're not partners in the full sense of the word. What is so difficult for a multi-billion-dollar company to recognize workers, afford them the traditional basic rights and recognition as workers, but also taking into account the socioeconomic conditions in the countries in which you operate, because they will differ from country to country, right?
Absolutely. Most driver partners who are interfacing with our platform are coming from, you know, journeys early in the morning, 4 a.m., and they have to pick people up the entire day just to make a living. We really observe that with a great level of sensitivity, which is why we've actually provided, the kind of safety features that we've provided. As an organization, we are fully aware, and you can sense what's happening on a global scale, that there is a need to collaborate, to come to the fore, to participate and contribute in the kind of discussions that will help us create an environment that's conducive for gig work at large. That's really where we're sitting. But at the same time, on our continent, coming from Garangua, my observation is that the storyline is also about creating a conduit so that we can move from individuals who are accessing the platform to asset-based economies. I mean, that's only a natural transition, but it will not apply to everybody because some driver partners are actually renting a vehicle from someone else. Some are not just using one platform. Some are not just driving the entire day. So we have to really be sensitive about the scale and the nuances around the different individuals who are at play here.
Let's hear from Zwelinzima Mavavi. I mean, does that scare or assure you that something is being done?
This whole process of YR is full of contradiction. Let me point you the first contradiction. The first contradiction is that South Africa already is a two-country in one country. It's a country of the totally marginalized, majority poor black people, the face of which in the main is the youth and the women. And you come and talk to them about 4IR, you're talking a Greek they don't understand. And there's a danger that they are going to be left completely behind in the entire process. And therefore, 4IR to them will represent a further deepening of inequalities and their marginalization. We've got to recognize that. The second point that I think we are making is that we cannot press the stop button. This thing is here, and this thing is beginning to have a huge impact on how we are organizing, even as unions. The days of big marches and petitions and sit-ins in the boardrooms are all going, and they're being replaced by meetings in the Zoom. Even negotiations now happen through the Zoom and other platforms. And therefore, a union that is not embracing this will be left behind. Part of that challenge of the contradictions is going to be these exploitative behaviors by companies. Here's an example of the Uber drivers who are being declared as independent contractors, but they are not being treated as co-owners of the business at all. They don't have a living wage. They have no provident medical aid schemes. They have no danger allowance. There's no health and safety regulations. They are being left on their own. And the management of Uber is raking all of the benefits of these tens and billions of rands of profits for themselves. That's a contradiction. And that's why the role of the unions will always remain traditionally to represent workers and to ensure that there is fairness in the system.
Alan, let's hear from you. I mean, as a consumer, I love the convenience. We just click, we press, we get our food on time. But we pay very little attention to where the money is going. The big tech companies reaping the rewards. George Bezos he's a trillionaire right now. Koos Becker, a billionaire, using this technology, but we don't have the workers in mind. Is it totally fair to lay the blame at these companies? The reality is that this gig economy has opened up some possibilities, not just of employment and income, but work flexibility as well. It has given people an avenue that otherwise was not there before.
We're speaking very much at a national level, but these are effectively global platforms. And our ability to regulate them, particularly as a developing economy or African country, is very, very difficult. And so I think, we really need to be working in a very innovative way about how we address this. We're trying to deal with, existing problems we have. The UN Secretary General has pointed out that, together with climate change, digitization has become the critical determinant of equality and inequality going forward. And I think, COVID has highlighted that. The people who are able to, have a phone, have data, rent a car, these are a relative elite on the continent. So in a sense, we have to step back. The president has said that this is our digital transformation strategy, but because it's ultimately focused on the fourth industrial revolution, on the technologies of artificial intelligence and machine learning, etc. The recommendations that come out are about an artificial intelligence institute, about incentivizing SMEs for the fourth industrial revolution. These are all important things. But what about bringing the majority of people into the modern economy, never mind whatever we call it, because there's a lot of fiction, there's a lot of ideology around the fourth industrial revolution. And fundamentally, we have to address the human development problems. Until we do that, we're unable to benefit from these technologies. We have to get on top of them. Zima is absolutely right about that. But we have to do it in a way that is inclusive and, more important than just inclusive, equitable. People can't just be passive users, cannot just be using tiny bits of data. They need to be enabled to actually, contribute to the prosperity of nations.
Indeed, we are going to get thoughts from our audience members and talk about this exclusion and how we bridge that divide. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Big Debate. If there's one thing that COVID-19 and the unending lockdown has made abundantly clear, it is that the digital divide in South Africa is deep and wide, especially in education. Patchy internet, unaffordable data, costly devices. These are just some of the challenges learners and entrepreneurs face. Let's hear from Teboho Khiba. Teboho, you are an honours student at the University of the Free State. Tell us where you stay and what it's like trying to keep up with your studies from home.
It is a challenge because currently I'm in Bloemfontein campus. I'm from Qwaqwa in Mangaung, a place whereby there's constant interruption of electricity. And with no electricity in that place means no network. And now we are in this new platform whereby now I have to keep up with these new multimedia platforms, and I cannot do that. And I was just fortunate that I have a laptop whereby there are other students who they don't have laptops. I myself struggled with data, having to now, how do I access my classes? How do I access my tests? And it was a struggle. Now I'm doing my master's. I finished with my honors degree. And within with that, I had to get a lot of help in order for me to actually, be able to compete and finish my studies.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. Rendani, I want to bring you in. I think this is so important. I was maybe bemused by how some schools and education institutions just took for granted when lockdown happened that students will just be able to access learning material, be able to educate from home, because you had children who had no access to these tools. You had teachers in township and rural schools who had no access. And yet for people like ourselves who are in the suburbs, education just went on. For academics and research institutions like universities and others who do have proximity to the policymakers, you do have the ear of government. Shouldn't we be starting there and compelling them to just start with the basics? How do we do that?
Exactly. If you look at something like electricity, that's a second industrial revolution technology. And the challenge now is more about generating it in an environmentally sustainable way. So if we don't have those basics right, we then run the risks of exacerbating the inequalities. I mean, one of the things that we should be cognizant of is the fact that while the pace of the fourth industrial revolution has been extremely accelerated by COVID, and we were then very quickly forced to adapt to these technologies in terms of online learning and teaching at a pace at which we had not envisioned. And we need to be cognizant of that as we go into the future. Do we have decently priced and sufficient data? Do our students have the platforms and the correct environments for them to learn from home going forward? So those are some of the things from a policy perspective that need to be in place before we jettison ourselves into the fourth industrial revolution. But however, this is a fast-moving train and we have to catch on very quickly.
Fast-moving train. I'm curious to hear what Wesley has to say. Wesley, your thoughts?
There are some things that are in place. However, it's true that the country is struggling in this regard. And I think I want to just make a simple example in as far as the data aspect is concerned. And when I talk about data, I'm not referring to connectivity and stuff like that. I'm referring to specifically information. Data is important for us to be able to have artificial intelligence. In other words, there's no artificial intelligence without data, information that is properly organized. So we need to start with those basics. And one of the things that we need to address very quickly is the area of skills from schools, ensuring that young people learn things that are relevant. And here, I know people talk about coding and stuff like that, but we also want to tap into creativity, because the other challenge is that as we move along, in future, there will be no need for coders, for instance, in the way that we need them today. Then what? So we need to be thinking what kind of work will be there in the future. And creativity, people who are resilient, who are able to withstand challenges and to come up with solutions, those are the people that we will need in the future. So we need to do what we can in the area of skills, in the area of data, and other aspects as well.
Thank you so very much. Ufente, let's talk about this, right? Not just about Uber. I mean, we're seeing how technology is helping in the treatment of complex cancers, in diagnostics, in all sorts of things. So there's no doubt that it is changing our lives for the better, but there's the reality of the socioeconomic conditions and the exclusion of workers. One of the fears and anxieties around where we're going is that we're losing control because all of this stuff is being innovated and being held in foreign countries outside of Africa. What do you say to that?
One of the most important things around data and actually society in general is respecting each other's privacy. That's fundamental. And when you look at it at a global scale, most organizations are essentially focused on making sure that they provide a secure platform. And we're all using, emails, WhatsApp, and other types of social media platforms, and we're sharing and exchanging information. And essentially, people depend on organizations to protect this information. At the same time, there is also an opportunity to, again, tap into opportunities for engagement outside of the digital space. So in our context, it's really about having the human technology aspect that you just can't get on a database, the kind of relationships that you need with governments, legislators, and policymakers and higher education institutions. Those things you cannot get, through some kind of privacy law. You can only get them on the ground. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution in this context, we have to be able to balance the two types of dialogues. The one that is, being on the ground and connected with our people. And the other one is understanding, the kind of technical requirements that we have to have in place to protect their rights and their privacy. And then you've got the caveat around providing, law enforcement with the kind of capacity that they need to act on, negative scenarios or incidents that are beyond their control. And, fundamentally, that's a key part of, the global responsibility around how data is used.
So, Lizzie, I've observed, even in the United States, when a lot of the innovators or the big tech companies appear before Congress, even in the Trump era, it's not just now, you'd see these senators and congressmen looking absolutely blank. We've had some explosive revelations around Facebook and violation of privacy and promoting violence and so on. And it seems as if The policymakers, the people we vote into office, are in the dark. The tech companies seem to be way, way ahead of them, taking everything that we've heard into account today, cost of data, no worker rights, and so on. Where is the regulation going to come from when the policymakers and the lawmakers awaken to the dangers way after the fact? What is the safest way of approaching the fourth industrial revolution, but without in any way making workers and consumers more vulnerable? Regulation?
Regulation is absolutely necessary, but I think I want to emphasize the point again. As a country, we are far more worse prepared to embrace a fourth industrial revolution because we've allowed structural problems inherited from our past to remain. Let's take just the example of education. During the first year of the coronavirus, we as a country witnessed a staggering 750 students dropping out of school in 1 year. But in normal circumstances, we know that the dropout rate in our schools is around 230,000 every year. Not one instance did we ever say, what are the reasons behind this? Is it because of this big rush to get higher percentages for matric grades, which makes teachers to squeeze out underperforming students at grade 10 and 11? Because most of the people who drop out from school are those that are doing grade 10 and 11. That's a factor. The second issue is then, if you look at the level of that dropout and you consider the fact that less than 10% of the unemployed have any form of tertiary education, and that a staggering 52% of the unemployed have no matric, and a 38% have no basic education of whatever, you can see that unless we fix the education system, which is currently totally dysfunctional, you look at our kids, those that can read with a meaning, we way at the bottom. If you look at those who understand mathematics at grade 4 and 5, we're right at the bottom of the ladder. Unless we have a leadership that understand that the 4IR discussion, the transformation of the economy, and addressing the inequality inherited from colonial apartheid, we're going to drown in mass as we speak about the 4IR. The impact of it is going to be further marginalization of the Black people, because the Black people remain the face of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, even 27 years into democracy. We need to change. You can't stop 4IR. We've got to adapt or die.
Well, what will it take then to get South Africa ready for the revolution in technology and work that is already upon us? When we return, we hear from our audience. Welcome back to the big debate on the fourth industrial revolution and the future of work. Is South Africa ready for the fourth industrial revolution? Robots, drones, more and more apps to control our lives and service our needs? Let's hear your views. We want to hear you from our audience. Sizwe, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think there's something sinister behind this fourth industrial revolution happening, because we know that it's not happening in our communities. So who is it working for if it's not working for the people? I would rather be in a cave somewhere and cooking in a hut with technology that works for me.
You do embrace technology, but you're saying the innovation must happen here and address community needs. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And it should work for the communities. We need to bring back the mindset of discoveries and inventions, because people are not doing that. We're waiting for the latest gadget.
All right, Sizwe, I think you're breaking, but you've made your point, and I do think that it was quite symbolic that, as he said, sinister, his picture just went smaller and there was darkness around him. I'm not suggesting anything, just pointing that one out.
I think there's a lack of will from the political sector. Uber has been here for more than 7 years now, and from the politicians, they've never come with regulations. They've never come with policies that are guiding the technology in terms of making sure that the technology benefits the locals. There are countries like China, whereby the meat taxes were there and they had policies. And then instead of just adapting to the new technology and using Uber itself, they were able to compete by their government assisting them by using their own app. Their app is in different countries right now and is even in our country, the app that is called Didi. But in our country, we have never had any program that is developed by government in order for us to even go and copy from those countries.
Unions absolutely should not put their heads in the sand. The working class movement should not put its head in the sand. And there are probably a couple of very practical steps to take. Firstly, we need to know technology. We can't be scared of it. So what is the technology coming? What is it going to do? And how do we identify what that means for ourselves as organizations, but also the workers that we represent? One of the major interventions, I think, would be identifying and separating between pro-employment technology and technology that replaces jobs. Some will create jobs. We must develop the policies to advance those kinds of technologies and that kind of technological change. At the same time, though, we're going to have to take positions that make sure that those jobs are good jobs, decent jobs. And there are a number of ways you can shape the behavior of the market, whether it's through national policy, whether it's through industry-wide collective agreements, whether it's through tinkering with the conditions attached to financing, to make sure you finance the purchase of pro-employment technology, etc. Obviously, there's a lot of work that will have to be done on skills. I won't get into that because the other colleagues and comrades have spoken to it. Let me come to a couple of things that I think would be massive. When we think ahead, at this point, I think there's sort of calamity looming. We've got unemployment, we've got more and more people without an income, and less of a market that can give an income to people. So one of the big ideas being talked about is a universal income grant, and I think that's very important. But as a red flag, I think we need to think about an economy of the future that doesn't have a taxable base to produce the money to fund a universal income grant. And then there are two more things. You know, if workers are going to lose their jobs, well, why is it that they must earn their incomes from their work? Should we not be beginning to think about workers owning the technology that replaces them, workers owning the companies that eventually replace their jobs? And there's another one, and along that line, beginning to think about diversifying and separating workers' incomes from their job. So finding the assets in society, whether it's companies, whether it's houses, whether it's infrastructure, but other assets that can produce income for workers so that we at least create cushions in a scenario that we can't really predict.
We are not ready as South Africans for the fourth industrial revolution. I am going to take the township where I am currently. As much as we would like to be able to access all these other technological things, it is not possible. One, people are unemployed. For them to access those things, they need data. My kids and other children that are going through school in my area. When COVID hits, it was a challenge to always have to go print out some material stuff for the children and they have to go online. It was really difficult and it is still difficult. The data, it's very expensive. You cannot do anything without data. The Department of Education will not supply the data. Second to that, those that are aware of the fourth industrial revolution that is currently here are the people that are exposed to the technology. But most of us in the township, we are not even close to being there.
Most of the people here in Botshabelo, as I'm from Botshabelo Unemployment Movement, are not working. They are unemployed. And if implemented in Botshabelo, or most of people will lose their jobs. A machine will do the job of 10 people. And those who are not yet working, they want to have a hope to get a job one day. So I don't think it's a great idea.
The fourth industrial revolution is happening at an unprecedented scale and it is unfolding so fast. It makes sense why people are anxious. They want answers. They want to explore how they can be taken on this journey. And that's why here on the Big Debate, we're doing this topic. And that's why we invited the Minister of Trade and Industry to come and be in conversation with us, to imagine a vision and a possibility for our people. But the Minister of Trade and Industry, Ibrahim Patel, his people told us they'll get back to us. And they didn't. When we return, we hear final words from our panel. Welcome back to the big debate on the future of work in South Africa and the fourth industrial revolution. We're getting final comments from our panelists. Ufenze, let me start with you.
We are living at a time where technology is going to intersect with people and our beliefs and our norms and our cultures. And it is really important for us to facilitate a transition that is just and fair and that is equitable. At the same time, we also need to, play our part in providing the kind of earning opportunities that will, facilitate this type of transition. And by and large, really work on the kind of policy reforms that we need that follow the realities on the ground, but also can foresee our entrepreneurial spirit. With a retail industry that's informal, accounting for 360 billion rand. I'm talking about the people who are selling food on the street. I mean, that's 360 billion rand moving in our streets.
But we don't want them taken over by Amazon and Take-A-Lot. That is not necessarily progress, right?
On our continent, we have 300 earning platforms, right? And 200 of them are African-made. What's happening is we are learning from the globe, and we're actually translating the application. And if you look at what happened with the industrial revolutions across Asia in particular, the core objective was to mimic, replicate, and implement. And we're seeing that right now with the kind of platforms that we're developing today. Yes, we're a global player, but we have a local mindset.
Final word on the topic, and we'll get back to our panel. Mr. Smarts Ngonyama.
We have to accept that this revolution is with us. That's number one. Number two is investment by the government, investment by business people in skilling our people. It is said that Africa is the next big thing. It is because of the pool of young people that we have, and they need skills. In Japan, for instance, there is what is called a GIGA program, which starts at the lower primary. Each and every child is given one iPad. And I think we need to move in that space. We can't be left behind. We're left behind in the first, second, and third revolution, not in the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alison, your final thoughts, please.
I absolutely want to agree with other people that there's no way that we can ignore the issues of the fourth industrial revolution. I'm just not sure it's a useful way of conceptualizing the challenges that face us from a policy point of view. What we do need is a transversal digital policy, data policy that allows us to deal with these social and economic processes of digitalization and of datification. And actually, the enabling environment is getting everybody on board. An enabling environment is having the digital and data infrastructure. It's having the human assets in order to drive the economy. It's about having the institutional environments and the regulatory environments in place for the kinds of beyond data protection that Ofensi was speaking about. Actually, for us as a continent, and that's why it's really unfortunate that the Minister of Trade and Industry is not here, for us as a continent, in fact, this past week, the African Union has been putting together an African data policy for Africa, for preparation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Without that, without a direct digital underpinning, it's really only the big economies that are going to benefit from this. So as I said, it's really unfortunate that South Africa is not showing leadership on this. This is no longer a sectoral problem. We need a policy that not only coordinates this across the public sector, coordination between the public and private sector. And very importantly, the point was made by our colleague from COSATU on the audience panel, understanding the macroeconomic dynamics, tapping into these global digital taxes that are due to us. These are new important sources of resource mobilization, particularly for social protection, particularly for connecting our townships for the next pandemic. And the informal sector will be able to tap into the economy and continue to operate. So really important interplays in our policy that we're not seeing between digitization, visibility of people because everybody's now online, social protection, taxation. These are critical debates, and they're not there in our policy at the moment.
Zilinzi Mavavi, final thoughts from you.
Trade-offs are going to be very difficult to make. On the mining industry, for example, the new technologies globally will create almost $420 billion in value. It will save 1,000 lives, and it will prevent 44,000 injuries. But then look at the contradiction. We stand to lose 330,000 jobs in the mining industry as a result of the introduction of those technologies. And in South Africa, where 4.5 million dependents depend on the mining industry, the consequences are going to be simply catastrophic. We may end up losing 52,000 of the 400,000 jobs that are left in the mining industry. That's one example. So the bottom line that we're making is that, yes, the fourth industrial revolution is not an enemy to workers, but however, if the development fusion is done in a manner that leads to more inequalities and destruction of decent jobs and worsening the working conditions, then it will become an enemy of development, because it will just create a bigger gap between the developed part of South Africa and the marginalized part of South Africa. We want to find an accommodation where we can see opportunities for decent jobs, for upskilling of workers, for localization, but at the same time for ensuring that the fourth industrial revolution does not take us right back in terms of even greater levels of inequalities.
Thank you so very much. So all of this is very intimidating for so many people, Ndani, but you have embraced it. Your final thoughts, how do we move forward?
The unfortunate part of not being ready for an industrial revolution, like we're seeing ourselves as now, is that you end up being subjects instead of active participants of that industrial revolution. Some of these companies start in garages, in Silicon Valleys and such, and they are designed to address local problems. And one of our audience members says, where's the innovation in our communities? Because what needs to happen is that these technologies need to take into account context. And obviously, if somebody scales up a technology that is meant to address the context in some way in the US, it obviously will be out of context in terms of the challenges that we have. And I think also what we've seen is that the kind of policy in Asia, in terms of how do we make sure our society is ready for this technology and not just be subjects to it. It talks to the type of skills that are needed at the technocratic level, and that will allow us to be agile. Lastly, if we don't then become ready, we end up having to compete in a globalized world without having the necessary skills, capabilities, and protections for our people that are required, which then becomes almost the colloquial equivalent of fixing your car while you're already driving in a highway without the fast-moving vehicles.
Well, I've certainly loved hearing from all of you. South Africa is playing a fierce game of catch-up when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution. Despite government slogans, many in our country are not even sure what the fourth industrial revolution is. Can we speed things up or develop a vision for an inclusive economy in the future? Or will the fourth industrial revolution bring us deeper inequality and exclusion? You decide. I'm Ridi Klabi, and you've been watching The Big Debate.